And another semifinalist, the last semifinalist actually that I'm going to be talking about here is going to be mousesports. And mousesports, yeah, other than NIP, in this case, it moved up and down, so to say. They, of course, beat Gambit in the beginning, then they lost against MIBR in 2 straight maps. Then they came back against Hellraisers, and then they beat FaZe in order to then be beaten by North in the semifinals. And yeah, it's an up and down, and it actually is simple as that. In that they, of course, against Gambit, but yeah, Gambit. I don't know if Gambit is a benchmark for a team that needs to be a lot of yeah. I don't know. I don't want to bash Gambit here, but maybe Gambit is not the team that you look at when you think about, okay, this is the team that we have to beat in order to be competitive in the way that we want to be competitive, especially when you're mouse sports and you're in the top 5 of the HRTV rankings. But then, of course, against MIBR, they lost, and they lost rather convincingly on both Mirage and Inferno. Um, yeah, and they just didn't have a good performance. I think that the players would agree with me there, and they actually did. Sunny, in an interview after the match against Hellraisers, actually said that they weren't really feeling it. MLBR just played better Counter Strike than they did, and they didn't really get into it. They yeah, for some reasons that yeah, MIBR was just better than them, and this is something that actually can happen in a case like this when MIBR, and I will talk about them in a few minutes. But when you have MIBR there, then maybe this is something that yeah, just might happen, but it shouldn't happen though when you are mouse sports, when you were at the brink of I think they were top 2 at one point, and the brink of making it all the way, in a time when Astralis wasn't that dominant as they have been for the last few months. But yeah, they just weren't able to show up there. But then against Hellraisers, they did. They came back, and of course, Hellraisers is not maybe Gambit territory, but also a team that you don't really look at as a benchmark to evaluate yourself when you compare yourself against them. Nevertheless, they needed to beat them, and they did that in 2 straight maps, on Dust 2 and then again on Mirage. Did that rather convincingly on both maps on Mirage, more so even on Dust 2. And this is something that I always find interesting, because Mouse Sports was the best team on Mirage in the world at some point, and that isn't really that long gone. But you could think that it is long gone, because they haven't really been able to uh, get an important win on the map against anyone really, against anyone of anyone noteworthy, of course. But now against Hellraisers, they were able to, yeah, and they did that. Then they went then on again against FaZe in the quarterfinal, and I will talk about FaZe as well later on for a few minutes at least. And yeah, they Mouse came back from losing their own map pick cage 16-1, and then they, like I said, came back, won Dust 2 and Train in order to get to the semifinals. Um, and I think that when you talk about mouse sports, and I actually mentioned that a few minutes ago, that they were on the brink of being one of the best teams in the world, or even the best team in the world for at least an extended amount of time, or like a certain period of time, to say the least. But they weren't really able to make that jump, and they, of course, switched up some stuff. They had problems with stand-in stuff, and then they had nothing, of course, stand in for them for one tournament. Um, then replaced Stuko, got Snacks into the team, who is a player that has a most certainly way different role than Stuko has, or had in the team, or is known to be is known to have in teams. So this is a lot of mix up, and there's the question that is it an improvement? Will they be better for it, and will there be a time where they will be able to make sure that this was worth it? And actually, Sonny was asked that in one of the post-match interviews, and he said that he thinks that they just need time in order to make the adaptation properly. And I can see that, but on the other hand, I think that it has also been said not only by me but by other analysts in the scene that or by analysts in the scene that they had that certain time frame where the other teams weren't really in the form that they were in. Astralis wasn't the team that we know them to be, or we knew them to be at least before the player break. I don't want to speak for now and for the future, but they weren't really that dominant at that time, and maybe it was between them and Navi to be that. And Navi wasn't the team that we knew them to be before the tournament, before the player break. So yeah, mousesports, maybe it's actually too late for them to make that jump. But the only interesting thing is that it's not even in the comparison to the other teams, because the other teams aren't really you can't influence the performance of other teams. You can't influence the form of other teams. So if these teams improve, then you need to improve as well. And this is the only important thing, actually, that they are going to be better than they were before they were before they made these changes. And it's always hard to tell if it's yourself who's the problem and who can't really perform to the lengths that you were to before, or if just the other teams improved and you weren't able to hang. And this is a period that I think mousesports find itself in, especially when you look at the quarterfinal against FaZe. Did they really win this series? Of course, they won it. They ended up being victorious, but I don't know if this question makes sense for any of you. But the question that I asked myself is, did they actually win that series, or was it more that FaZe choked and made sure to lose this series by one way or another? Of course, not willingly, obviously, but if it was maybe the case that FaZe beat itself. And this is a question that really can't be answered, because you always need two to tango. But this is also something to make note of. So this is maybe the theme of this episode, of this podcast episode, is how often does that happen? Now, for FaZe and for mousesports, or especially for FaZe, you find out that they have these problems, have had these problems in the past, and I think that one could actually get bored by me speaking about their psychological issues, maybe, or their problems with, I don't know, tilting or choking, or just having these problems of consistency where they don't need to be problems of consistency when you have these players of that caliber. But we'll talk about that in a few minutes. And we are talking about mousesports now, and for mousesports, this is actually quite interesting, because they will need to evaluate their performance themselves. We'll look at, okay, we beat FaZe, but did we beat FaZe? Was it us? Was it our doing that we won that more than it was the other team's failure to not beat us? And yeah, it's hard to argue this way when you see FaZe beating mousesports on their own map, pick 16-1, and then afterwards not being able to convert properly after mousesports then started, of course, to get back into the series. But yeah, this is a lot of talk for the fact that in the end it was mousesports who went then into the semifinals, who got the third, fourth place in the tournament. Like I said, then actually put up a good fight against North. We cannot forget that they went 16-0 against them on Dust 2, and then they had two very competitive maps on Inferno and Mirage. So it's not like they didn't belong into that semifinal. They actually, one could argue that when a few rounds went the other way, they would have been able to win that series. So yeah, mousesports will need to evaluate themselves and will need to be able to put Snags into positions to succeed in that team, or else that investment wouldn't be able to show the fruits of the labor that it could show, of course. And yeah, I will leave it at that. We will see them in a few days again, and then we will be able to see how they will have developed, maybe even more after this tournament, or where they can find themselves in the competition of a major.